Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to do a video for you today on another one of our 2016 Design Challenge winners. This is Becca Scott's design called Penny Pincher. It's featuring our DiscDuo beads, and then I think the pinch comes from the pinch beads. She did hers in a nice copper color. I'm guessing that's where the penny came from, with the DiscDuo being in the shape of that. So I'm going to change up the colors just a little bit. If you do need any of the supplies to do this penny pincher bracelet, you can go to the left hand side here. We'll do a little drop down with links to all the different materials that you need to manufacture this penny pincher bracelet. So for Becca's bracelet, like I said, she used the vintage copper down the sides and also some copper pinch beads. I'm going to use two different colors of my beads. For the DiscDuo, they are our 2-hole disc shaped bead, and they're a 6mm, and I've chosen to use the Aztec gold. For the bracelet, you will need approximately 13 to 15 depending on the size of your wrist. For the pinch beads, I'm actually using the jet bronze color. I use the opaque champagne luster here in my example. I want to darken it up a little bit, add a little bit more color, so I'm going with that jet bronze here. And for the pinch beads, you are going to need right about double the amount of your DiscDuos minus 2. So if you end up using 13, you're going to do 26 minus 2, so you're going to use about 24 of your pinch beads. So that's an easy way to figure that out. You also, if you do want to purchase materials from us, you're just going to need 1 tube of each of the items that I'm going over. In addition to the DiscDuo and the pinch beads, we also have some SuperDuos in here. Here I used that topaz Picasso color. Here I'm going to use the Jade dark travertine, which is a nice kind of bright blue with a little bit of that Picasso finish. To brighten up even more, for our O beads, which the O beads here, I had chosen to use the Roslyn or the Roseland, but it's really, really light, so I'm switching up to the Crystal Labrador Fool in the O bead. And for that, again, 1 tube will do it. You're actually using 4 of the O beads per pinch bead, so that's an easy way. And then I've also decorated the sides of the pinch beads with them as well, so you're going to use 6 total. So however many pinch beads you want to use, you're going to use a total of 6 of those. I have an 11-0 and a 15-0 also. Becca used an 11-0 towards the middle or towards the outside, and then the 15 in the middle. For the 15 OC bead, I am using the lined cinnamon luster. It's a pretty kind of beigey pink color. And then for the outer edge, I'm going to kind of grab that pink even more and go with the galvanized blush in the 11-0. Both of these seed beads are Miyuki seed beads. They're Miyuki brand, so 15 and 11-0. For the middle of the project, I have some crystal rondelles running down the middle, and these are the 2x3mm. You could also use the 3x4mm. Either will work, and I'm using those in the light Colorado AB color here, that nice little light topaz. For that, you are also going to need 13 to 15 of those as well. To string the whole thing, you'll be using 0.006 wildfire beading thread, and I'm using, for the colors that I've chosen, the gray tone. They also have white, gray, black, green, and blue. So the gray is going to go really nicely here with my colors. I could also use the green because of my SuperDuo color, but because you're going to see it, I usually pick a color that is close to the actual transparent beads that I'm using, which in this case happen to be the Potomac crystals. We are going to be using 2 needles, so I have 2 size 10 beading needles, and I'm working on a bead mat. You can work on a bead mat or a bead on it board. Currently there's other things on my bead on it board, so I have my bead mat here. And we are going to be using a cup button clasp for our closure. Handy near me, I have always a thread zap 2 to work with. I have a pliers to flatten out the end of my thread. And you'll also want some super new glue in case you want to glue off any of the ends of the bracelet, either the beginning near the clasp or the end as well. This is a bracelet where we're going to go down the middle and then come back and then go down again. So the nice thing is we'll have the opportunity to put on the clasp right away and reinforce that as we go. To get started, we're going to be using our 15-0s and our DiscDuos, as well as our cup button. So go ahead and lay that out with about 5 feet of beading thread, 1 needle on each end. So I have my needles on my thread and my button ready to go. I did pour out 2 of my 11-0 seed beads and then 1 of my crystals. I'm going to put those inside my cup button, which is, I forgot to mention, that turquoise Picasso color. I have on my needle then on the right hand side putting an 11-0, the crystal, the 11-0, and I'm going to pick up my button with the bowl side kind of facing down. I'm going to put 1 needle through the left hole and 1 needle through the right hole of that cup button. If you have a clasp, you'd want to put on your clasp and your wire protector at the same time. That's going to brighten up the end of that clasp just a little bit with that nice little shimmer and shine inside of it. When I'm coming out the back of the cup button, I want to make sure, because I am using 2 needles, make sure that your threads are even. You can kind of take your needles at the end, pull the thread through, and make sure that they come down and at a similar position here when you get to the end of your cup button. That's just going to make sure that when you are out of thread, it's equal distance to each side. For the start, I'm going to add 2 of my 15-0 seed beads, each on, or I'm sorry, 3 15-0 seed beads, each on the left needle and on the right needle, and let those fall down next to your cup button. To proceed from there, we're going to add 1 of our DiscDuos. The DiscDuos again are 2 holes and they're 6 millimeter. They do not have a side to them. One side is not flatter than the other. They are the same on both sides. So go ahead and just add on your DiscDuo. 1 needle going through one hole, 1 needle going through the other hole. And then push that bead down towards your cup button. When I'm coming out of the DiscDuo, I get to start the pattern of my bracelet here. So the bracelet, when you look in the middle, ignoring the crystal, it's a pattern of DiscDuo, then the needles get separated. I add 2 15s and a SuperDuo and 2 15s on both the right and the left side, and back through a SuperDuo, or back through a DiscDuo. So separating the needles out here, I'm going to add 2 15s on the left and the right, and the SuperDuo on, back to the right, SuperDuo on, and then back to the left, because it's a pattern of 2 15s, SuperDuo, 2 15s. Once you have those on your needle, on either side here, we're going to take another DiscDuo and put on the DiscDuo so that 1 needle is going through one hole, 1 needle is going through the other hole, and push that down towards the clasp. It's a very simple middle pattern here then, continuing with that design, going with 2 15s, then a SuperDuo, then 2 15s on each needle, and then adding the SuperDuo, or adding the DiscDuo, I'm sorry, in order to gather them together in the middle. You're going to proceed with this pattern the whole length of your bracelet until the DiscDuos touch on your wrist, and then we'll go ahead and we'll add a loop for our cup button. That'll give you a nice fit to it, that it won't be too tight on your wrist. So go ahead and add all of your SuperDuos as well as your DiscDuos here on your project in the groups of 1 DiscDuo to 2 SuperDuos. After 14 DiscDuos, I'm getting ready to add my loop for my cup button to sit inside of. Before I do that, I usually like to make a little bit of a V, bringing the threads together before the loop, rather than keeping more of an open loop. I think it tends to hold a button better. So to come together to start my loop, you also want to have 1 of your 11-0 seed beads ready to go. I'm going to add on each side of my DiscDuo with the right needle as well as the left needle 3 15-0 seed beads. bringing the needles together then, 1 11-0 goes on with the needles going through in the same direction. So both needles are going through that one seed bead and coming out the end. I then have that little V shape there right after my DiscDuo, so I can get ready to add my loop for my clasp. If you want to, you can either add these with the 11-0s or the 15-0s. I have a bunch of 15-0s here sitting on my mat, so I'm going to use those. And I'm going to pick up my right needle or my left needle, doesn't matter. And I'm going to add here, as you can see, a bunch of 15-0 seed beads. If you want, you can come back later as we progress in the bracelet and use more seed beads for a peyote stitch. Could have used the 11s here and actually, or the 8s here, I'm sorry, 15s here rather, and then we can come back and add the 11s into the loop. Once you have a sufficient amount of beads on the end there, you're going to take the needle of the thread end that you're working on and go back down through that 11-0 seed bead. That's going to create a loop with your 15-0s. Then taking the other strand here of thread and needle, I'm going to pick that up and reinforce that whole line of my 15-0s. Going back through that whole thing here. As you do it, the first thread that you had in hand may pull back a little bit and become exposed. Don't worry about that. We'll tighten it up as soon as we finish going through and reinforcing this loop. Running that needle the whole way back through. And then down through the 11-0 as well. After both threads come out the 11-0, I'm going to get rid of all this excess thread that's showing. Pulling on the right and the left then. We have the 15-0s. I'm going to separate my needles even further by taking the one needle down the right side and the other down the left. And that tightens up that loop there. So now that our loop is made and that we're at the very end, we get to now go ahead and add basically our next set of SuperDuos and our O beads to our project. In between the two SuperDuos here, we're going to be adding 2 O beads and another SuperDuo that is separated out by our 11-0 seed bead. So we're going to go ahead and get started doing that. So I'm going to lay out some of my 11-0s and some more of my SuperDuos. So to get to the point that I'm ready to add here, I have the needles separated out and I'm going to add 2 of my 15-0s just to get started. On the side then, above the SuperDuos, or I'm sorry, above the DiscDuos and in between the SuperDuos, it's going to be a pattern that starts with my 11-0 and then another SuperDuo, another 11-0, and then before I go in and add into the SuperDuo that's already there, I need to get out some of my O beads here. I get to add in my Labrador color there of my O beads. So Becca used 2 O beads in place here, and those are going to sit right on the side of that little SuperDuo that's already there. So on the right hand side and the left hand side, you're mimicking what you do. Here I'm just starting out with those 2 15-0s because I need to get basically to my starting block. Then I'm going to use 1 11, another SuperDuo, another 11, and my 2 O beads there. And down the other side then through the SuperDuo that's already there. As I come out the SuperDuo now, I get to do the full pattern, which is my 2 O beads that go on my needle, then an 11, SuperDuo, 11, 2 O beads. Push that down a little bit, and I'm going to go into the next SuperDuo. So basically we're going in between here, adding in those Labrador and adding in a new SuperDuo bead with an 11 on each side. So 2 O beads, 11 O, SuperDuo, 11 O, 2 O beads, and into the next empty SuperDuo from our first little section going down the middle. And then again, whatever I do on the right hand side, I also do on the left hand side. So you can see the start there on the right. Here on the left I have it started. I'm going to continue down the whole project, adding in those Labrador full O beads with the SuperDuos in the middle of the 2 11s. So you can see I've gotten to the end here, and I'm going to repeat what we did at the beginning. Basically just half of the SuperDuo O bead progression there. So here at the end, I'm going to add my 2 O beads to the right needle, an 11 in my SuperDuo, and then after the SuperDuo, I'm going to add 2 of my 15s, and then we're going to go into the beads right at the top of the DiscDuo and out through the top of the cut button. At the same time I'm going through the top of the cut button here, I want to make sure to grab through that 11 O seed bead there right at the end. I'm going to do this on the right hand side, and that puts that SuperDuo on that side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the left hand side to repeat the pattern of the 2 O beads, 11 SuperDuo, and then my 2 15s. And then again, those 2 15s will go up through those 3 beads there on the button, and then out the top of the button. Crisscross through the crystal then with each of your needles, and also go down through the 11 and down through your 3 seed beads right after the cut button. And again, this is a 2 needle, so because of that, a lot of the things, most times you're using 2 needles. Everything you do with 1 needle, you're mimicking with the other. So basically we just reinforce that button again, and then both needles are coming out the base here of that cut button. I'm going to do a tight little pull to make sure that that pulls in the SuperDuos that we added last to the project. So now we have that outer row basically of our SuperDuos hanging out there ready to get something attached to them. What Becca did was attach to them the pattern of 11 O, O bead, and then pinch bead. So we're going to do that same thing to get to the outer edge here of that SuperDuo. Doesn't matter if you're on the right or left side or top or bottom, depending on which way you're holding it. When you're coming out those 3 15s, just to brighten it up a little bit, I'm going to add 3 11 O's and sew into the top hole of my SuperDuo bead. And you can see that then kind of covers that edge. When I'm coming out of that top hole of the SuperDuo, on each bead, again, you're going to add an 11, an O bead, and a pinch bead. So I have my 11, my O bead, my pinch bead, gotta get out some of my pinch beads here. So my 11, my O bead, and my pinch bead. Of course, the one pinch bead that I had on my mat here doesn't have a hole. That is actually the first time I have ever had that happen with the pinch beads, but good to check. And then my O bead goes on, and my 11 O, and right across to the next SuperDuo empty hole from the previous line. So you can see how that kind of decorates the top there. If you wanted to, you could also reverse the pattern using the SuperDuo or the O beads right next to the SuperDuos, and then the pink right next to the actual pinch beads. I'll do that on this side here just to show you that because you're using the same amount of beads, the spacing is going to be the same, and then we'll decide which one we like better. So 3 11-0s go on this side, and I go up to the second hole of the last SuperDuo that's there. So for this one, I will use my O beads right away. And I have my O bead that I'll put on, my 11-0, my pinch bead, 11-0, and O bead. So all I did was for this side, change the pattern that's next to the SuperDuo. And then sew down to the next SuperDuo. I actually like that pattern a little bit better, and I only thought to do it. It's kind of a happy thing when you're doing a project and you think, oh, this would look nice, and then you do that reversal kind of in the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and thread off that last little section that I did on the opposite side and continue with this new pattern of just the O bead next to the SuperDuo, kind of mimicking the baseline. So it'll be O bead 11, my pinch bead, 11, O bead, and then picking up that next SuperDuo. So that's the pattern we're going to do down the right and down the left. So I'll do it one more time since I switched the pattern up a little bit. We do O bead, then 11, pinch bead, 11, O bead, and down through the next SuperDuo that's there. So you can see the SuperDuos just kind of go right down the side. We're going to do that down the right side and the left side. And then after that, we'll come down through the middle and add in our crystals. You could also keep it empty in the middle, but Becca had her rondelles in the middle, so we'll add our rondelles in the middle as well. So I'm going to come down the right, come down the left, adding in those pinch beads and the O beads and the 11s, and then we'll come back down the middle and add in our crystals. So as I get to the end adding the pinch beads, I'm coming out the last of my SuperDuo here, and we're going to add 3 of our 11 OC beads to mimic the previous size. On the right hand side and the left hand side, I've already placed those 11 O's. I'm going to then come into the 3 beads right after my DiscDuo and go through those 3 beads as well as that center 11-0. Give a little tight pull so that way those pinch beads are sitting correctly. And on the other side, I'm doing the same thing. Taking over those 3 beads there after putting on my 3 11s. And then going up through that 11-0 seed bead. So we already have multiple strands going through this clasp here. Because that's the case, if you want to, I had talked earlier about doing Peyote Stitch, stitching every other bead with an 11-0 in addition to the 15. Because we have to still add the center line, I'm just going to reinforce the clasp, not doing that Peyote Stitch. If you do want to learn the Peyote Stitch, you can look at it. Actually, I'll show it to you. Why not? So I'm going through one of my 15s here at the end. I'm going to grab an 11-0 seed bead, and I'm going to skip over one of my 15s, or 2 of my 15s rather, and go through another 15. So I'm skipping over 2 rather than 1 because I'm going from a smaller bead to a bigger bead. And see, that kind of pushes that in on the side. Another 11 goes on, skip 2, and go through 1. Another 11, and so forth, skip 2, go through 1. Give a tight pull to start creating that little illusion of the Peyote Stitch. Again, add an 11, skip 2 15s underneath it, and go through the third 15. I'm going to continue this, adding those little 11, almost like a fringe on the outer edge, and then we'll come back and we'll add our crystals down the center. to the opposite side with that first needle going through. And I've gone around and added that little peyote trim there with that 111 per 15. The needle that I have in my hand then, I'm going to go back down that 11-0 seed bead. That's holding kind of the rest of them in place. If you need to, you might need to grab some pliers and just do a little pull here, because it's a tight space right now, that 11-0, because it has a bunch of threads going through. Since I decided to do the peyote stitch, the needle that I did not go through the peyote stitch with, I'm actually going to come back down that 11-0 seed bead. Once I'm out of that 11-0 seed bead, I am going to come down the sides then so I can get back to the center of my DiscDuo. To get back to the center of that DiscDuo, I've gone through with my needles, one going to the right hand side of those 3 seed beads, one going to the left, and I'm going to go through my DiscDuo as well as the first 15-0 on the outside of it, with my needle then on the right and left coming out that first 15 between the DiscDuo. If you want to, you could actually be done at this point and kind of tie off your threads, but I'm going to mimic what Becca did and add in the crystals. So again, I have the 2x3mm crystals. You could use the 3x4s as well. I'm not exactly sure what size Becca used on hers, but what we're going to do is take a crystal and go through the crystal with the right needle, go through the crystal with the left needle, going through in the same direction. Give a little pull to kind of drop it there in the center. And then the needle that's on the right hand side is going to go through the 15 before the next DiscDuo, the DiscDuo, and the 15 after the DiscDuo. After you have both the left and right through, give a nice tight pull on both sides. That way the crystal's just going to kind of sit nestled in there. So now that I'm back through, I have the three seed beads that I went through the 15s, and my needle's coming out after each of those. We're going to start our pattern here to add that little crystal by going through the DiscDuo and the first 15-0 after the DiscDuo on both the right side and my left side. Coming out that DiscDuo, on my right needle, I put a 15-0. On the left needle goes a 15-0. Let those drop down. Picking up my 2x3mm crystal, I'm going to put the crystal through one needle going left to right and the other right to left. That's going to crisscross through that crystal. On goes a 15 to the right and a 15 on the left. And to get that crystal nicely positioned inside, I'm going to pick up the 15 then before the DiscDuo, and the 15 after the DiscDuo. On the opposite side, same thing. When I'm after my crystal, a 15 goes on, then I go through the next 15 DiscDuo and the first 15 after that next DiscDuo. Give a nice tight pull and kind of position those in there. And once you have your tight little pull there, it'll kind of pop the crystal in the middle. So there you have that nice and nestled in there. Again, I'll do one more for you. On my right needle, I pick up a 15, and on my left needle, I pick up a 15. Let those drop down. Pick up a crystal. One needle goes from right to left, and the other from left to right. And this is important. You want those needles to go opposite directions and not the same direction, or the rondelle will sit facing the wrong way. After crisscrossing through the rondelle, a 15 goes on each side. And then I'm going to take my middle here grab the next 15 DiscDuo and 15 in line on the one side, and the same thing on the other side. 15 DiscDuo, and then the 15. And once you're through on the opposite side, coming through those 15s again, just do a nice little pull to the right and a pull on the left to make sure that that crystal drops down into that middle of that X formation. Continue building. You can see the difference between the added middle here versus the outer, or the blank middle, so you can see which design you like better rather, and continue on or finish up. So I'm going to continue on adding my crystals right there in the middle. It also helps to make the bracelet lay a little flatter when I'm doing this design. So continue on adding up your crystals, and when we get to the end, all we have to do is knot off the cup button and the thread right next to it. So after all the crystals are in place, you can see I've just come out of the last DiscDuo. All I'm going to do is simply hide my thread by tying a knot. I'm going to bring the thread over to one side of the DiscDuo, take both of my needles off my thread, which is good because they are very short, or the one is very short. So I was hoping that I didn't have to add thread right there at the bottom, at the end. But I'm just going to take the thread over to one of the sides and tie a knot. The cool thing is you won't see the knot because the button's right there, and the clasp for the button is going to go right next to it. So I'm simply tying overhand knots and square knots, doing right over left and then left over right. I'm going to grab my thread burner then, burn down my edges, and as I burn down the edges here, it's creating a little stop at the end of that thread, so that way that knot cannot undo. Once you're done with the ending piece there, tying off the thread and having the crystals perfectly positioned in the middle, your bracelet is finished. I'll kind of model it there for you. The cool thing about this is, again, on the sides, you can really use different things if you don't have all of the supplies. The DiscDuo or the round trio would actually work down the middle of this design if you did want to switch it up at all. But you can use some different materials for this design. If you go back to the beginning of the video and you do need any of the materials for this penny pincher design, you can go down to the drop down menu that we did, or you can go below the video to the show more under the descriptions and the details of the video, and that'll give links to the products as well. I had fun making this 2016 winner of Becca Scott's, the penny pincher. Again, you can kind of change it up along the sides. It gives a good base and a good middle line for the base as well, with adding in those crystals to kind of flatten that out. Again, check out some different materials. You can use some different supplies. That's what's so cool about a lot of these two-hole beads like the DiscDuos and the SuperDuos. It really allows you some variety as far as what you want to use along tops and bottoms, and even in between as well. If you do want to see more designs and more videos, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel to get regular updates on new products, on color trends, on things that we're doing in the store, as well as design challenge winners and our own designs also. If you do want to see any of the other design challenge winners, you can also become a member of our Facebook group, which is Beading and Jewelry Making, and ask to become a member there. Interact with a lot of our customers and a lot of people that make jewelry and manufacture awesome things, and you can ask questions, answer questions, help other people out. It's a really great beading forum there. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and if you get a chance to get your hands on some of these beads at your local Potomac Bead Company store or online, have fun making the penny pincher bracelet by Becca Scott.